As an MSP, if you think about all of the marketing tools at your disposal, you probably wouldn't think that PowerPoint was one of them. But of course, PowerPoint is just a way of presenting information to people, and anywhere you communicate, you can improve that communication to influence people. My special guest today is an expert in telling stories through PowerPoint and using it to drive sales.
Hi, I'm Emily Schneider. I'm a visual storyteller specializing in PowerPoint design. I have a magical knack of simplifying complex information to help stories come to life.
And what a fantastic skill. And as you and I were just saying just before we started recording this interview, what a great world we live in that you can have a very, very, very specific talent and skill set and be able to work with people all around the world in all sorts of different industries. You certainly couldn't have done that 20 years ago. So Emily, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We are going to talk about how you use visual aids such as, and I know you specialize in PowerPoint, but how you use those to influence people to choose your MSP, to buy more services from you, and of course, just generally to communicate better. So let's first of all learn a little bit about you. So whereabouts are you based and what got you to this point in your life where you have this set of superpowers?
Oh, thanks, Paul. I'm so happy to be here. I'd love to tell more. So I am based outside of Chicago in the suburbs, in Arlington Heights, technically. My journey began when I was 16 with the My Sweet 16 invitation was the first thing I ever digitally created. What I remember most was about the way people responded and the smiles and the kind of emotional connection that helped when I created something that then somebody responded to. And then in the end, they all showed up for my party. So it was fabulous. It was a win-win. What I have learned is that my creative curiosity and my emotional intelligence or just ability to want to help people has created this beautiful harmony with my design skills and my skill set. So I came from the agency marketing world. I was an art director. I worked on shopper marketing and more traditional below the line stuff. But what I loved was connecting with the decision makers and helping to tell the story so that they bought the product or what we were selling, right? Those visuals for the marketing materials. And I have streamlined from a general creative director into niching myself into PowerPoint because that's where my magic happens. That's my zone of genius. I see the world in simple forms and shapes, and I love being able to bring that to other people so that they can tell their stories with more confidence and more clarity and create stronger connections. Again, I'm such an empathetic person. I love connecting with people. And so when I can empower somebody else to do that, and I get to be in my zone of genius, and then they get to shine bright, like win-win for everybody. So it is pretty magical that I get to do what I do, I think, because it definitely lights me up, and I love helping other people light up too.
That's amazing. That's great to hear. It really is. And there's something about PowerPoint that seems to bring out the worst in people, isn't there? We've all sat, I had a corporate career up till I started my first business 20 odd years ago. And I've sat through more than enough bad PowerPoint sessions. But even then, as a business owner, I've been presented to, I've been sold at. What is it about PowerPoint that seems to make us just make bad decisions and make bad design choices?
Well, I think it goes back to, and I think the term I always hear is like death by PowerPoint, right? Everybody does. It used to be like a negative word, to be honest, in my world too. It was kind of cringy. I think that's part of the reason I have embraced it and love it even more is the challenge to just change those expectations, to flip the script for other people. But PowerPoint is a tool. It is a storytelling tool. It is a presentation tool. It's not meant for us to be brainstorming and to be creating ideas and to be building things. It's meant to house that information that we bring in from offline. And bring it together. And it's kind of that package in that wrapper. I think death by PowerPoint comes, or as I say, the cringiness comes from a couple things. One is when we don't know what to say or how to say it, we over communicate. And so we start to share everything, or we think we should tell them everything we know. And we lose that kind of connection with our audience. And now we're just cringing at these these slides full of data or information that doesn't make sense. And also, I think PowerPoint does a great job of trying to help us make it better. But what we lose is the simplicity, consistency, and intentionality that comes with really strong stories, whether they're verbal, whether you have the supporting presentations or just in a conversation. And when you can be intentional with how you tell your story, you create that stronger connection, and you're more seen and you're more heard. And again, so I think sometimes we default thinking that we're making it easier by we're actually kind of making it more complex for ourselves. So, yeah. And lack of training. Again, like people from the corporate world, even as a designer, having to work in PowerPoint to get to my clients, nobody ever trains you really on presentations or how to use the platform. You're just kind of thrown it and expected to use it. Some people have a way with it, right? They're kind of just, it just comes naturally, and a lot of us don't. And so I think there's that beautiful balance, and I love helping to train and educate and do for people, because it is a tool that has a lot of power if you use it right.
I'd forgotten that phrase, death by PowerPoint, and you're absolutely right. Yeah. And what's probably the most depressing thing in the world is where someone presents the PowerPoint. I always thought of PowerPoint as a visual aid to help you with the thing that you're trying to say. But when someone brings it up and it's on the screen and they say, right, second slide, third bullet down. So as you can see here in this 12-point text, and then they read the words that are in front of you. And I think that's the death by PowerPoint. Do you think that possibly some of the problem is that, you talked about storytelling there. Do you think that part of the problem is people often don't know how to tell a story, and so therefore the PowerPoint they're creating is trying to back up something that isn't yet fully formed? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I don't know, where I'm going with that when you say, why is there this challenge? I actually want to back up to this presenter reading all the slides. So what I've kind of described it as, I like to empower people to be conversation conductors. So think about it when you go to see an orchestra, right? You have this conductor that stands on stage. He stands up in front of the orchestra. You have all these different sections, all these musicians, and he helps the music come to life, right? He says when instruments start, how loud, how soft, when they go, when they don't go, how they harmonize together. And as this audience member, you create this emotional connection as you hear this harmonious, beautiful sound. And so when you think of your slides as that harmonious music to your voiceover, to your story, I think that changes the way you present, or that changes the way you set yourself up to tell your story. I think the other challenge when you say is that people don't have a plan, or they don't know what their story is. I think it really also comes to where I find a lot of my clients don't really, or they're seeking, right? They don't know, but they know they need something, is visuals don't have to just be a picture. A visual story is highlighting and focusing on what the key topic, those key takeaways, what your main objective is, and streaming that through so that you can really, again, lead your audience slide by slide, section by section, to pay attention to the story and highlight what you want. Data is visuals. Copy can be visuals. Pictures, of course, illustrations, icons. There's so many ways. But again, I always preach simplicity, consistency, and intentionality. And when you can simplify what you're saying, be consistent with your treatments, and be intentional with your choices, you start to set yourself up for a strong visual story.
Yeah.
There's really no other way around it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's funny, back in October, I went to ScaleCon 24 in Las Vegas, and I was one of the speakers. I did the keynote marketing speak at the end of day one, marketing talk at the end of day one, and Nigel Moore did the sort of the wrap up. Nigel Moore from the Tech Tribe did the wrap up on day three. And I thought my PowerPoint was good, okay, verging on good. And I'd have 2 big words on a slide, and I'm thinking, I've nailed that. And then Nigel, when Nigel was doing his tour, his PowerPoint was a mix of exactly what you've just said. So a mix of images, and he had graphics, but not overly graphics. His whole thing was structured around different parts of the brain, and he used. And I can't remember exactly. I'm sorry, Nigel. I can't remember the exact thing you said. But then people don't, do they? They go away from it, remembering how they feel, that was epic. But he used sort of the brain, and was relating it back to technology, and he was using the visuals to back up the story that he was telling us from the stage. And initially I'm like, this is brilliant, and then I felt a bit depressed, thinking, because I'm going back next year, and I'm thinking, I've got to up my PowerPoint game. Seriously, I've just given you a sales lead, by the way, there, Emily. Just in case you weren't completely obvious what that was. So when you work, and I know you've worked with MSPs and you've worked with all sorts of different businesses around the planet, when you work with someone on their PowerPoint, and obviously you're coming at it from a design point of view, but I guess the last thing you look at is what the design should be. When you're looking at a PowerPoint, let me go back a step. Is that when you start working with someone, do you have to look at it from a what point are you trying to get over point of view, or do you even have to much earlier than that have a conversation about, here's why the default templates in PowerPoint aren't going to help you out, and here's why you need something bespoke? Or actually, by the time people reach you, are they ready to invest in something better?
By the time people reach me, they're usually seeking something better. I do work within existing templates because sometimes you have to, but I'm a rule refiner. So give me a template and let's see how we can push it, right? Because templates are built for standard information. When you're giving keynotes, when you're telling a new story, when you're giving business updates, you don't always have existing slides or existing template layouts that navigate or that will set you up for success. And so we have to be, again, intentional with what we're saying and how we're saying it. But I think that there's so much power in that. I just want to hit on a little bit more of that neuroscience, as you were saying, like Nigel was talking about the brain. So we naturally will hear something and we'll kind of sidetracked on our own story, or you're talking about his brain and I'm thinking about this neuroscience that comes with presentation and storytelling, right? Like I automatically went into my own story. So naturally, as an audience member, when you're there listening, however long that is, you do lose engagement, you lose them. And so when you can simplify that and elevate that visual story, you keep them engaged. So I wouldn't harp too much on your few words or your simple slides, because what you did is you gave your audience the key message or those key notes that you were talking about while that slide was up. So if they heard something and they went in their own head, they could easily come back because you've given them those key points that are really easy to digest. Again, that slide, third bullet, 12-point font, I'm not going to be able to find that again. I'm gone for that whole slide. Yeah. But when you make it really simple, you keep your audience engaged. We're also 65% more likely to retain information when it's visually designed. So if you think about the power of, again, highlighting copy, visuals, using color, using really streamlined data, it helps your audience listen better. We all also are used to like all this information coming at us at all the time. So when we can set ourselves up to lay out the story that follows our verbal story, it becomes so easy for people to be engaged. Think about picture books, right? They do a beautiful job of telling stories and you don't always need words.
Yeah, no, and it's the story telling aspect of it that I wanted to pick up on next, because I remember I've read hundreds of business books, and particularly the psychology of business and marketing. And I've read something somewhere, and it's not coming back to me which book, but something somewhere that we as humans respond to stories and thrive on storytelling because back in, like 12,000 years ago, before we could write, that was the only way we had to pass information on from one generation to another. And we would tell stories around the campfire while the dinosaurs were roaming around us, and that's how we passed information on. And so, if today, if you and I were doing a podcast interview and we just listed facts, bullet point, fact, that wouldn't be as compelling as us talking and actually telling stories. And like I just told you a story of me sitting at the back of an audience watching a master at work and feeling my soul deflate because I thought his stuff is better than my stuff, right? And of course I want to be the very best I can be, and that's a story, right? That's not a fact. That was a story with emotions within it. So, and I believe there are parts of our brain, or if you put someone inside a functional MRI machine, so that's like an MRI where you see in real time what's happening. And if you read someone some facts, one part of their brain lights up. You put those same facts into a story, such as a fairy tale, for example, which of course is they're the classic stories. Multiple parts of the brain light up, and that's why we remember that. My question is, if you are using PowerPoint or doing a presentation, whether it's a sales meeting, whether it's like a strategic review with a client, maybe even if you're talking in front of a room, and you don't consider yourself to be a natural storyteller, even though all humans have that ability built in, Emily, where would you start with starting to pull out, how do I get this across within a story?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I just want to be super transparent. That is not my expertise, but I do coach my clients to help craft their story better. So where I start and what I have actually on my website a tip page with 4 steps. And the first one is really, you have to first start with knowing who your audience is and what your key objectives are, what you want them to think, feel, and do. You have to lay that out before you get started. And then the second phase is crafting your narrative. And I don't think that should be done on a computer or on any kind of screen. I think I actually encourage Post-it notes and a mark and a Sharpie, so you can't really erase either. Just start writing down what you want to say. And when you have those Post-it notes, what you'll start to see is a cadence of a story. You'll start to see that setup. So you're going to start actually with the end in mind. You're going to lay the groundwork of what the goal is, why you brought everybody in the room. Again, we all come from different places. So when you can get everybody on the same page, you're going to connect with them. Then you're going to, just like a traditional fairy tale or a story, you're going to start from the beginning. You're going to talk about the key updates, what you're there, remind them why they're there. That's where your personal narrative story comes in. So you create this emotional connection. I love how you're saying, like, it's just part of our human nature and our human evolution that stories are how we share information. That's how we know things from the past, right? I mean, you can get very technical with biblical and testaments and all that stuff too. Like, it's just that's where it is. That's creation, right?
Yeah.
But once you start them, once you engage them, once you tell them what they're going to do there and why they're there, and you connect them emotionally with some kind of story, it doesn't have to be super personal, but something that is relevant to that audience. You then go to the middle part, which is where you give them that's the heart of your presentation. You spend the most time there. It's laying the details and the data and the specifics and really telling them where this tension is or what you need to update or what you're teaching them. And then at the end, you're going to wrap it up. You're going to drive home that impact. You're going to remind them why they're there. You're going to create a call to action, and you're going to summarize your key takeaways or your key points. Again, we need that kind of wrapper and that information, just again, like a story. You set it up, you lay all this drama and this, what's happening and these character development, and then you kind of bring it all together and there's this beautiful ending, or there is an ending of some sort, or that call to action that leads to the next thing that engages in the right conversation. So you drive your audience along so that you get them where you want at the end. But you got to know where you're going before you even start.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you said that's on your website. We'll give out your website address in just a few minutes. It's just occurred to me, you mentioned about religion. It's just occurred to me that all Bibles are rule books told through storytelling. If you look at it that way, if you take the faith aspect out of it, that's what a Bible is, right? It's this is how you should live your life.
Story.
Exactly, yeah. And these are the good things, these are the bad things. And it was a very, very easy way of communicating that to people who couldn't read. Because obviously the vast majority of people couldn't read, but they could go into church and enjoy stories thousands of years ago. So that's absolutely fascinating. Final question for you, Emily, and I'm hoping this is a chuckle moment for you. What's the worst thing that you've ever seen in a PowerPoint?
Oh, that is a really good question. I think it's the death by PowerPoint. It's the slide that has everything up there with all your voiceover and everything's black and white. So yeah, I think it's just like that overwhelmingness of like, I'm going to shut this down and come back another day because it doesn't make any sense. It's just words and I don't want to read them.
Yeah.
I'm a visual person. I don't want to read all the words.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Emily, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Let's talk about what you do for MSPs. So tell us what you do and please give us your website address and how we can get in touch with you.
Yes. So like I said, I describe myself as a visual storyteller. My specialization is in simplifying complex content and data and information. I think, I work a lot with MSPs to help them synergize information so that they can lead their conversation, so that they can present with confidence, with knowledge. They can create those authentic connections that drive impact, that create engagement, and that leave a lasting impression for your audience to do and act as you want so your business can move forward. And my website is IamEmilySchneider.com. I'm also super active. I love connecting and networking on LinkedIn as well. You can find me there.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Edge.